Tonight on Skyline, the American dream is starting to feel like a survival test, and that too for the Indians abroad. One missed immigration hearing. It could cost illegal immigrants $18,000. Thousands of Indian tech workers, they are racing against a terrifying 60-day deadline after layoffs. Green card rules are changing instantly. Deportation fear that is rising, and America's visa system, it is becoming tougher, stricter, and far more unpredictable than before. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's stories, they are not just about policy anymore. They are about families living in uncertainty. Parents worried about their children, engineers afraid of losing everything overnight, students questioning whether America is still worth the sacrifice, and Indians across the world quietly asking a painful question. Is the US dream becoming too dangerous, too unstable, and too emotionally exhausting to chase anymore? Well, I'm Driti Atri, and tonight we break down 9 explosive stories that are shaking Indians in America and exposing the growing fear inside the US immigration system. Well, let's start with the first segment. Tonight, fear is rising, and that too rapidly, across immigrant community in America after a shocking new proposal from the Trump administration. Imagine already facing deportation from the US, and suddenly somebody is telling you that you owe the government $18,000. Well, that is exactly what Washington now wants to do. According to reports, illegal immigrants who fail to appear in immigration court could soon face fine up to $18,000. Here, officials say that this amount reflects the government's actual deportation cost, including arrest operation, including detention, paperwork, transportation, and removal expenses. Now, pause for a moment here and think about how aggressive this sounds. Deportation itself is already terrifying for undocumented immigrants, even they are wrong. But adding massive financial penalties, that creates a very different level of fear. Well, the Department of Homeland Security says that the number of immigrants that are failing to appear in immigration court, they had exploded in recent years. In fact, in 2022, around 62,000 deportation orders, they were reportedly issued because people did not appear in the court. By 2025, that number had reportedly crossed more than 300,000. Well, Washington says taxpayers should not carry the financial burden anymore. But here critics argue something deeper that is happening here. They believe the government may not actually expect more immigrants to pay these huge fines. Instead, they say that the goal is psychological pressure, creating so much fear that undocumented immigrants, they stop feeling comfortable living in America at all. And tonight, many immigrants are changing how they live because of this particular fear. Some avoid keeping bank accounts in their own names. Some avoid official paperwork. Some avoid business ownership entirely because they fear that government recovery action later is going to ruin them. This is no longer just about immigration enforcement anymore. This is becoming emotional warfare through financial pressure. And tonight, immigrant communities are asking questions. How far is America willing to go to push the undocumented immigrants out? And yes, while undocumented immigrants face new fear and pressure, thousands of legal Indian tech workers, they are now facing their own immigration nightmare after mass layoffs. Can you imagine spending years building your life in America? You have high salary, apartment lease, children in school, in fact, car loans, mortgage payment, future plans, and then suddenly one email arrives. Your role has been eliminated. Well, for most Americans, layoffs are painful, but for Indians on H-1B, layoffs can become life-destroying because the moment an H-1B worker loses employment, a countdown begins. 60 days, that's it. Find another sponsoring employer within just 2 months, or you have to leave the US. Tonight, more than 15,000 Indian tech professionals, they are reportedly trapped in this exact nightmare after mass layoff across the US technology sector. Meta, Amazon, Oracle, major firms have cut thousands of jobs, and Indian workers, they appear to be among the hardest hit because of how deeply Indians are connected to America's tech industry. But this time, the crisis is worse than previous layoffs. You know why? Because the job market itself, it has slowed dramatically. Earlier, skilled engineers, they could often find new jobs very quickly, but today hiring takes months. Companies are becoming hesitant to sponsor visas, and AI is replacing some roles. Budgets are shrinking, immigration scrutiny is becoming stricter. Now imagine the emotional pressure inside these families tonight. Well, parents are trying to stay calm in front of their children while secretly panicking about visa status. Workers applying to hundreds of jobs daily, families discussing backup plan to suddenly return to India after spending years building a life abroad. In fact, Seattle engineer Vikas Pathak, he reportedly applied to more than 150 jobs after being laid off. Others say hiring processes move so slowly that the 60-day deadline it feels almost impossible. And you know what? Here's the frightening part. Even highly skilled workers with very strong resumes no longer feel safe because in America today, performance alone it may not protect the immigrant workers from layoffs anymore. And while laid off Indians struggle to survive inside America, another sudden policy change that is now creating fresh panic among the green card holders. Tonight, the US government is backtracking after triggering massive panic among thousands of Indian professionals. Now, earlier, if you remember, USCIS announced a dramatic green card policy shift that could have forced many foreign workers to leave America and complete their permanent residency process through their home country instead of staying inside the US, right? And immediately, chaos erupted. Indian tech workers panicked. Immigration lawyers sounded the alarm. Social media exploded because for Indians already trapped in massive green card backlogs, this felt catastrophic. Can you imagine living legally in America for years, only to suddenly be told that you may need to leave the country entirely to continue your green card process? And then something unexpected happened. In fact, hours later, USCIS appeared to soften its position. Officials introduced two key exemptions: economic benefit and national interest. Now, think very carefully about what this really means. America may still allow certain highly valuable foreign workers to stay and adjust their status inside the US, but only if officials believe that their work benefit the economy or national priorities. That created temporary relief though, but that's not clarity. Because tonight, somebody fully understands how these exemptions will actually be applied. What qualities are national interest? Which industries matters the most? Which workers are protected? That uncertainty, that is itself creating a lot of stress. And this matters specifically for Indians because Indian professionals dominate large part of America's H-1B workforce. Technology, healthcare, engineering, finance. Well, thousands of families depend on adjust of status rule while waiting years or maybe sometimes decades for a green card. Here, immigration experts, they warn that forcing people to leave the US, and that too during processing, it could disrupt jobs, family stability, children's education, and visa renewals. And tonight, many Indians are quietly realizing something painful. In America's immigration system, even long-term legal workers, they can suddenly feel unstable overnight. And while USCIS softened one policy after backlash, another Indian national is now facing deportation proceeding after being detained by the ICE. 26-year-old Indian national, he is right now sitting inside the US immigration custody awaiting possible deportation. Well, according to reports, ICE officials in Los Angeles arrested Parminder Pal Singh and that too on May 21st over his alleged criminal record in the US. Authorities say that his record includes vehicle theft, in fact, vandalism, trespassing related offenses. Now, understand why stories like this, it immediately becomes more than just one individual case. Every time an Indian national becomes involved in criminal proceeding abroad, online discussions explode globally. Immigration critics use such stories to just justify tougher enforcement. Here, immigrant communities fear rising stereotyping. And governments quietly watching public reactions here, they take the action. In the meantime, federal authorities say that Singh is reportedly being held in an immigration detention facility while deportation proceedings continue here. Officials have not disclosed the details though about his original visa status or how he entered the country. But again, this story it also reflects a much bigger shift that is happening inside America right now. Immigration enforcement is becoming tougher. Deportation actions are increasing and authorities are increasingly prioritizing removal involving the immigrants, and that too with criminal record. In the meantime, India's Ministry of External Affairs has reportedly stated that India supports only legal migration pathway and cooperates with nationality verification when foreign governments seek deportation assistance. Well, tonight, many Indians living abroad, they are watching these cases very nervously because they do understand something very important here. America's immigration system is now entering a far stricter phase under Trump-era enforcement priorities. And yes, while deportation fear rise, another major green card proposal is now creating panic and that too across Silicon Valley itself. Tonight, some of America's biggest technology voices are warning that Washington may be making a dangerous mistake. A new immigration proposal suggesting foreign workers should complete green card proceeding outside America, it has now sparked concern across technology industry, specifically among AI companies and startup leaders. You know why are they worried? Because America is currently fighting a global competition for talent, specifically in artificial intelligence here. Every country wants elite engineers, researchers, developers. China is kind of investing aggressively, Europe is competing harder, India's tech ecosystem is growing rapidly. And now critics fear that America may be creating instability exactly when it needs global talent the most. Technology leaders say that forcing workers to leave the US during green card proceeding, it could create huge uncertainty for everyone. Universities, startup, major corporations that do rely heavily on skilled immigrants. And remember this, Indian professionals are deeply connected to America's technology industry. You name it. From Silicon Valley engineers to CEO of giant companies, Indians actually help build major parts of America's modern tech economy. And you will agree with that. Now imagine how nervous international students feel tonight. Some spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just for what? To study in American universities, hoping for long-term career over there. But increasingly, they do see layoffs, visa restriction, green card uncertainty, and growing political hostility around immigration. In fact, some immigration experts say that the proposal may eventually face legal challenges because adjustment of status provision, they are rooted in long-standing US law. But in the meantime, others believe that the government is intentionally creating stricter interpretations to reduce the immigration pathways gradually. And tonight, one huge fear is spreading through the global tech circles. Could America accidentally push away the very talent that helped make it dominant in technology and AI? And while immigration uncertainty spreads across Silicon Valley, Mr. Marco Rubio is trying to calm India publicly over America's visa overhaul. Well, tonight, Mr. Marco Rubio is insisting that America's immigration crackdown is not specifically targeting India here. Standing beside India's External Affairs Minister, Mr. S. Jaishankar, Mr. Rubio said the ongoing visa and immigration changes, they are part of a broader modernization effort that is being applied globally. Well, Mr. Rubio also praised India's economic contribution to the US, saying that Indian companies have invested more than $20 billion into the American economy. Can you imagine? But despite these reassuring words, many Indians remained really not convinced. Why? Because the number tells a very emotional and different story here. Indians account for the overwhelming majority of H-1B visa proposal. Indian workers dominate large part of America's technology workforce. So even if the rules are technically global, Indians naturally feel the impact more heavily than almost any other nationality. Here, Mr. Rubio, he argued that America faced a massive migration crisis involving millions of undocumented immigrants, and that in recent years. And he said that every country has the right to shape immigration policy according to their national interest. In fact, he even referenced his own immigrant family background from Cuba while defending legal immigration pathway. But tonight, many Indians listening to Mr. Rubio's words, they are asking a very different question. If America still values Indian talent so much, why are immigrant pathway becoming harder, slower, and more uncertain? Because reassurance alone, it cannot erase all the tension that is spreading across immigrant community, right? Families see layoff, students see tougher scrutiny, companies see stricter rules, and it is the workers who are increasingly feel that the whole system itself is becoming less welcoming for them. And while Mr. Rubio says the changes are not targeting India, new H-1B numbers, they are now showing just how dramatically the whole system is changing. The H-1B system itself is undergoing one of the biggest transformations in years. According to USCIS data, properly submitted H-1B registration has dropped a shocking 38.5% this year, falling from nearly 344,000 to about 211,000. And that's not a small decline. That is a massive collapse. And the US government, in the meantime, says that this happened internationally. Officials argue that they are now prioritizing highly skilled, higher paid workers instead of low-wage mass registration. More than 71% of selected applicants reportedly held the advanced US degrees this year. In the meantime, lower wage category sections dropped very sharply. Now think about what this really means for Indian workers specifically. India accounts for roughly 71% of approved H-1B applications historically. So when the system changes, Indians feel the impact the first and the hardest. In the meantime, America's largest Indian IT firms, they are already seeing the consequences here. That's right. TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, Tech Mahindra. In fact, several other major companies reportedly received significantly fewer approvals this particular year. Well, Washington says that these reforms, they are very important to stop the abuse and protect the American workers. But critics say that the whole system is increasingly favoring only the elite, high-paying roles while shutting the doors on ordinary applicants and the smaller employees. And tonight, many Indian students are preparing for American careers. They are quietly realizing something painful here. The H-1B dream is no longer about luck anymore. It is becoming a high-pressure competition involving salaries, elite degree, AI skills, and corporate sponsorship power. And yes, while America tightens its immigration system, another terrifying reality is now emerging for Indians already trapped in the green card backlog. Tonight, millions of Indians in America, they are trapped inside one of the world's longest immigration backlog. According to estimate, Indian national account for roughly about 1.1 million of America's pending employment-based green card cases. That is nearly 2/3 of total backlog. That's shocking. Let's pause for a moment and think about how unbelievable that really sounds. Highly skilled professionals can spend about 10 to 15 years waiting for permanent residency, even while working legally, paying taxes, building life in America. And during those years, the entire future remains uncertain. Job change that becomes risky, layoff becomes terrifying, children face dependent visa aging issue, families postpone their life decisions for years because immigration status that remains unstable. In fact, some workers entered America believing that a green card it would eventually arrive after a few years. Instead, they are now realizing that they could spend most of their professional life waiting. And tonight, the emotional pressure, that's enormous. Families appear stable from the outside. Nice homes, good salaries, successful career. But privately, many live with constant anxiety over visas, renewals, policy changes, immigration uncertainty. In fact, some are now actively preparing a backup plan to return to India if things worsen further. Others are investing in Indian property as emotional and financial security. And increasingly, Indian entrepreneurs, they are openly encouraging global Indians to consider returning home. And finally tonight, after all these layoffs, visa fear, deportation threat, and policy shock, there is one question. Is the US even worth it? Well, for decades, America represented hope for millions of Indians. Better opportunity, better salary, better future, a place where education and hard work, it could completely transform a family's destiny. But tonight, that dream, it feels more fragile than ever. Deportation fear are rising. H-1B competition is becoming brutal. Green card waits are stretching far beyond a decade. Immigration policies are changing instantly, and even highly skilled legal workers increasingly feel unstable inside the system. And at the very same time, India itself is changing rapidly. India's growing economy, India's expanding startups, and Indians abroad, they are beginning to ask difficult emotional questions about identity, stability, and where their future truly belongs. Because tonight, the issue is no longer about visas. It is about uncertainty, respect, stability, and whether immigrants feel emotionally secure building their lives in America or not. I am Driti Atri, this was Skyline. And trust me, the next chapter of the global Indian story may change the future of immigration forever.